Okay, thank you so much, Thijs, for joining me. I'm really excited to have you here. So important what we're about to talk about, because I think so many people are in this boat and really, really, really suffering. And I noticed this as soon as I put out a post talking about being over busy, I had literally hundreds of responses saying, "Oh my God." So I was just like, yep, this is obviously an area that everyone is really feeling at the moment. So,
Mm.
before further ado, I just want to do a quick introduction and just talk about your fantastic book. So, Dutch psychologist, author, and expert on stress management, Thijs Launspach teaches at the School of Life Amsterdam. He is a trainer and keynote speaker on stress and burnout and writes a weekly column for a national newspaper in the Netherlands. He has written several books on stress management and millennials in the workplace. In Crazy Busy, Keeping Sane in a Stressful World, he examines why we often work ourselves to the bone and what we can do to prevent this. So,
Mm.
thank you so much for being here.
It's very good to be here. Thank you for your kind words.
Of course. And so, okay, first of all, what made you feel this was the right time to write the book? And also, describe a time when you felt burnt out.
Yes. Oh, such a good question. Because actually, this book is quite. It's from a couple of years ago already. So the Dutch version of it was actually pre-COVID. But I'm afraid to say that COVID didn't really solve the stress problem, to say the least. So I think it's only become more relevant in our day and age. Um, because we live in a stressful world, as the title says, and there's just no going around it. But and it's not entirely your problem either, and it's not necessarily bad to be a bit stressed every now and again, or to be a bit busy now every now and again, and it's just perfectly natural. But it is something you should watch out for, especially when you sort of tip over into the chronic kind of stress, the bad kind of stress. So it was a good time, I think, to write this book, because I think these skills are skills that we all need at a certain point, especially in our modern day of working and living. And I now completely forgot the second part of your question. Oh, you asked for a time in my life where I felt burnt out. Well, the interesting thing is, I think the word burnout, or the word combination burnout, means different things to different people. So actually, we have a lot of people that are in the Netherlands nowadays that are absent from their jobs because of prolonged chronic stress. And that's what we tend to call burnout, but it's something that's more severe than what you in English would call burnout.
Mm.
But there have been times when I was a little bit burnt out, where I was pitying myself a bit because I was that busy. I was just doing multiple projects at the same time, and I wasn't very pleasant to be around as a person, and I wasn't very pleasant company for myself either. So I think this was mostly, well, I'm an entrepreneur and a trainer, so I take on my own work, and I do really like my work and love the projects that I'm involved in. But then all of these projects combined tend to make for a very busy agenda. So this is something that I encounter weekly, let's say.
Mm.
But I do have the tools now, especially after researching the book, to sort of monitor myself quite tightly, which is something that researching stress did for me. So, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And especially when you've read about it and you know the theory, and you're just like, why? I need to actually do this. So, as you mentioned, like burnout is so different to so many different people. But what exactly is it, and what do you think are the consequences of it?
Yeah, so burnout, as I said, is not really strictly defined yet. So it's also not in. So I'm a psychologist, as you said. So we use sort of guidebooks for psychological illnesses, and it's not in one of those. Um, and there's sort of different meanings to the word burnout. So The meaning that I take in my book is the following: is well, so you have stress, right? And that's something we encounter on, let's say, a daily basis. Doesn't necessarily have to mean that there's something completely wrong with you. It just has to do with the way we are working and living. Um, and it's quite usual or quite normal to have this maybe 1 or 2 days in a week in which you feel a little bit overstressed. I would say that's sort of typical. But when that's multiple days a week, or there's no getting out of the stress mode, let's say, or the alarm mode, that tends to be quite unhealthy for you. So that has all kinds of consequences. So you make worse decisions about your health. You tend to sleep a lot worse. You tend to get more vulnerable for illnesses. All of those things, right? So those are all consequences of chronic stress. And if you have a prolonged period of chronic stress, let's say a couple of months, for some people it's even longer, then you run the risk of really getting to a burnout kind of situation, which is basically your body stepping on the emergency exit or on the emergency brake. So you can sort of you keep up a pattern of chronic stress for a long time, but there comes a point in which your body just doesn't respond as it should anymore. So when you're in burnout or in a burnout sort of state, you tend to be absent from your job. You tend not to be able to fulfill your daily responsibilities because of a prolonged period of chronic stress. And usually that takes about a couple of weeks or a couple of months to sort of recover from, to give your stress system the rest it needs before you can slowly reintegrate in your usual day. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about burnout. So it's a stress related injury, let's say.
Oh God, yeah. At this rate in the UK, we're all going through stress-related injuries with
Yes.
just the situation of chronic bizarreness that's happening.
Yes.
And
Well, in your way of working, but with political developments as well, right? So
yes.
I might imagine that you tend to be a little bit overstressed nowadays. Yes.
Oh my God, yes. The past month and a half has been, several prime ministers and a monarch dying. So yes, it's been a
Yes.
pretty busy in the UK, and very stressful. But it's weird because like we have a really workaholic culture, and I
Yeah.
think we got this kind of like an import or an export from the US of this workaholic
Mhm.
culture in the UK. So why do you think we have this, and what makes us create an identity around work all the time?
Yeah, so that's exactly one of the things that has changed, at least in the last couple of decades. So where work used to, for most people, used to be something that you trade in your time for a salary. Nowadays, that isn't enough, and we sort of take our identity from our job as well. So it doesn't have to be just a proper job. It has to be something that fulfills us and makes us whole, and it's something that should be our purpose in life as well. And there's not necessarily something wrong with that, unless that keeps you from taking proper care of yourself because you're just working too hard all the time. And it was interesting, you mentioned the word workaholic, which is a word that was quite common in the 90s and the 80s to use, but it's just about disappeared from our language. And that's not because we are less workaholic now, but I would say it's because we all tend to be a bit workaholic every now and again. But yes, so work is more than ever part of our identity and part of who we are, and that has all kinds of good consequences and good things involved. But also when it's sort of when it takes away from the time that you have to recover from your job, it tends to become a little bit dangerous.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. But
so there's just let me add, there's nothing wrong with working hard. This is
yeah,
one of the misconceptions about stress. There's nothing wrong with working hard or with the occasional bout of stress. but you do have to be careful for a prolonged period of chronic stress. That's what you have to look out for.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've always read that, a little bit of stress is actually good for you because it just kind of
Yeah.
spurs you on to do things. But we seem to have just completely accepted this kind of lack of work-life balance. So why do you think this is now?
Yes. Well, I'm actually a little bit critical of the term work-life balance because I know a lot of people, and I know exactly zero people with an optimal work-life balance or who have work and life perfectly balanced out. It just in practice doesn't exist, I would say. And the other thing is it sort of stems from a little bit of an old-fashioned way of looking at things, in which work is the thing that makes you stressed in life, and the rest of your life is the thing you recover from all of the stresses of your
Mm,
work. Well, I don't really know about you, but there's plenty of things in my private life that sort of entail a bit of stress
true.
as well. And there's even some things in my work that I recover from the stresses of my daily life,
Mm,
let's say. So I'm not too big of a fan of the work-life balance idea, but what it is about, it's about flexibility, I would say. So
mm,
not about perfectly balancing out the two, but sort of um, finding the flexibility to sometimes prioritize work and other times prioritize the other things in your life when that's needed, because that's something we tend to forget, because we when we talk about stress, we usually talk about work, but it's when stress becomes bad or chronic or unhealthy, it's usually a combination of things. It's a combination of our jobs and the other things that happen in our lives,
mm,
our families,
yeah.
or moving house, or acquiring a house, or marriage, or having kids. All of those things take a toll on you stress wise as well, and
Mm,
it's usually the combination of things. um, so but I do, coming back to your question, I do worry about the amount of time and the amount of attention we have to give our work nowadays. And so I think a couple of things changed, one of which is the position that our work takes in our lives, as we discussed before. But another thing is that our jobs have become so much more complicated. There's just more skills involved that you have to
mm,
have, more training involved, more technology involved in all kinds of ways.
mm,
Technologies that sort of um, that demand your time and attention even when you're not on the clock,
mm.
which is a big risk there as well. So we tend to run out of time we have to recover from the stress that our work and our lives gives us, and it has to do with all these things combined.
Yeah, God, definitely. And it's true. And one of the biggest things I find, and you mentioned this, is FOMO.
Hmm.
We tend to be really, really addicted to FOMO and less
Yes.
inclined towards FOBO, which I really like. Yeah, just because it's really strange. It's like I've seen myself doing it, which is like,
Yeah.
oh, you're doing something, but you're also trying to do something else at the same time because you're worried you're missing out on the other thing. It's bizarre.
Yes, yes, it's true. So FOMO, of course, fear of missing out, which is something that's sort of in our culture nowadays, because I would say we have a maximizing culture, where the idea is that through working hard and through smart organization, you can take part in everything, and you can sort of reach a state in which you don't have to miss a single thing, which is, of course, a load of, well. Um,
You can say
I'm
it.
careful not to swear, which is bollocks, of course. But
Yeah.
you're always going to miss at least most of the things that are going on. Even if you try to be everywhere, to shorten the time that you have for things, to slash the attention that you can give for every single activity, even then you're going to miss most things. But the thing is, you're also, when that's your sort of pattern, when that's the way you go about things, that's you're also going to miss the thing that you're actually there to experience, right? So if your mind is occupied with organizing going to the next event or checking that web page that you're missing at the moment. You're going to miss the thing that you're doing at the moment, and that's the big risk, I would say. So as you mentioned, I would say if we sort of had a little bit more FOBO, fear of burning out, instead of fear of missing out, I think that's going to be a lot healthier, let's say. And realizing that whatever you do, whatever strategy you take, you are going to miss most things in life, and that's just the way that it is. It's unfortunate, but the thing you can do is pay enough attention to the things that you're doing.
Oh God, I know. Oh, I'm so guilty of this. It's so bad. Like I will be doing something on my phone whilst I'm watching a film. That's the kind of thing. I'll be doing like some work whilst I'm, watching a film
Yes,
and things like
it's
that.
the dual screen thing, right? So they're now actually they're adjusting the way that they write television series, because people are just looking at other screens instead, and they do have to follow the plot line. So movies are getting dumber because of the dual screen thing, right?
Oh God, that's so
Which is one of the
depressing.
consequences. Yes, it is.
Oh God, I know, and and we're causing this, so I'm totally guilty of it, and this is the thing, which is, for me, being busy is an addiction. Like, so how do
Yes.
we stop feeling guilty or even stop being busy all the time?
Hmm. um, Yes, that's the £1,000,000 question, right? How do we stop being busy all the time? In which I want to reiterate the fact that that sometimes being busy is the right thing to do. When it's important, when you're doing sort of an important project, or you have something that you have to give your all, then it's often the right choice to be busy. And there's not a lot wrong with that, as long as you take care of yourself and sort of recover in between bouts of stress. That's I think the most important thing. But I would say one of the ways that we sort of can achieve that is doing away with our maximizing idea that we can sort of be everything and have to keep our options open and do multiple things at the same time. That's just a wrong way of going about things. And there's a bit of just the technology involved, and we have to find out ways to use these, and we're just finding out those ways, and we're just finding out the etiquette there. But we should sort of there is a couple of things that you can do. You can not take your phone into the bedroom, for example, or not take your phone to family time at meals. Those kind of things really actually help. And it's about the things that the agreements that you have with your family and friends as well, and with your partner, about when you are fully present. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but at least having some time when you're fully present is really important, I would say.
Yeah, and you both need to do that.
Yeah.
Not, yeah, otherwise it's
And
just like
preferably at the
one-sided.
same time as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's the whole other conversation of trying to convince another
Yeah.
person to do that. But a lot of the business I find is like one of the worst things is the perfectionism, and
Mhm.
because it really does affect how busy we are. So, like, what do you think is the worst thing about perfection?
Um, well, I would say there's good sides to being perfectionistic every now and again, right? But of course, it goes wrong with when you're perfectionistic to all of the things that you're doing. So there are going to be things in your life which have to be perfect or near perfect. You're not going to say to a surgeon, just be a little bit less perfectionistic. No, that's one of the things, right? That has to be perfect. But the trick is in knowing which things have to be perfect and which things just have to be good enough. So the big problem lies in trying to get everything perfect, because you're judged not only by the quality of your work in our day and age, but also by the amount of work that you get done. Which sometimes mean that you have to lower your standards to not 100%, and not certainly not 110%, but maybe 80%.
Mm.
So actually, sort of kicking the addiction of perfectionism is actually experimenting with slightly lowering your standards. What about when you're not perfectly happy with one of the podcasts that you're doing, but you're just putting it out anyway, or one of the
Hmm.
things that you're writing maybe has a spelling error in it or something? That might be unpleasant, but it's not the end of the world. So
Mm.
training yourself to be happy with good enough when that's okay, when good enough, whenever good enough is good enough, and be perfectionistic when when things really have to be perfect. I think that's sort of the strategy to take.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, I remember reading Seth Godin's book, The Dip, and he does talk about don't like only look at the things where you really want to excel in and just forget about the
Yeah.
rest. So I was like, yeah, I
Yes.
know, definitely. And yeah, and the thing is just that okay, so I find meditating really hard. Like
Yes.
I've done like ridiculous amounts of courses and
Yeah.
like mindfulness. I've got all the apps on my phone, but
Hmm.
I still struggle to do it. So
Yeah.
what makes us like how do we push ourselves to actually do it?
Yes. Well, that's a really good question again, and I think that's exactly what you're meant to feel with meditation. So I think one of the big misconceptions about meditation is that it somehow has to be relaxing, which for most people it doesn't. So it's not about relaxing. When that happens, when you find a meditation exercise actually relaxing, that's of course a good thing and it's an added bonus. But for most people, most often meditation is a hard thing to do, to organize within your life. But actually doing the activity of meditating is supposed to be difficult. So it's about training your just very much training your attention, and that's the whole benefit of meditation, or is one of the benefits of meditation. So the other benefit, of course, is when you check in from time to time. Of course, in our modern way of working and living, we're all the time in our heads.
Mm.
So we're using our thinking minds and not really our experiencing minds. So checking in every now and again with a little meditation exercise, just to see what's happening in your body or with your breathing, is
Mm.
actually quite helpful in training yourself to be sensitive to the signals of stress that your body gives to you. So that's the other benefit. But I would agree, it's a tough thing to be doing consequently. And I'm reminded of a quote by John Kabat-Zinn,
Oh yes, of course.
the inventor, let's say, of mindfulness. And he says, basically, you should be meditating every day for about an hour, unless you're very busy. Then it's going to be 2 hours.
Oh God.
Um, which I find a bit excessive myself, to be honest. But it's about maybe one of the ways of sticking to your meditation sort of routine is just drastically lowering your standards or your goals.
Hmm.
Maybe an hour or 30 minutes or even 15 minutes of meditation a day is just too much work for now. But maybe you can do 3 minutes, 3 minutes of a bit of meditation exercise. Everyone has got 3 minutes. So just lower your standards and build from there. That's sort of the advice that people give when building sort of habits.
Oh
And I
yes.
think it also goes for meditation, which again, meditation works for some people and not all people.
Mm.
And I think it's very useful to have at least some knowledge or some basic sort of exercise that you can reach to whenever you need it. But let's be honest. It's not the way for everybody to
No,
fight stress.
no, definitely.
There's loads of people that preferably use exercise or
Yeah.
walking or those kind of things. They really help as well.
Yeah, for sure. I remember being told to do 7 different types of meditation in a day, and it just took up like 4 hours of my time.
7?
Yeah,
Really?
by various coaches and stuff. And I was like, I have no time left of my day now just because I'm doing like 7 different types of meditation, gong meditation, or how about the raisin meditation or the
Oh
walking
yes.
meditation. I was like, what is this? So it
Oh
ended up
bless.
becoming
Yes.
a chore in itself. But you're right, a
I
little
think
bit
you've
helps.
just invented a new kind of stress, meditation stress.
I'm telling you, I think there's going to be
Yes.
a new
Let's
found
coin the
thing.
term right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
meditation stress for sure.
But
And
I think there's just to be let me just say, I think we, in the way we look at self-care, well, I'm a big proponent of taking care of yourself, right? That's a big part of the book, and I think it's very important. But we are slowly running the risk of having that sort of optimization culture built into our self-care routines.
yeah,
So self-care doesn't have to mean that you have to meditate for 4 hours and jump into an ice bath and do 20 prayers and 3 gratitude meditations as well. It's just by finding a few simple things that tend to help, not maximizing your self care routine. There's no such thing.
yeah, no, exactly. It's sort of self-defeating, completely defeating the purpose for.
Pressure to perform within the self care sort of industry, which is a very cynical thing, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, gamifying the process as well. On top of it, I was just like, oh God, this is
Yeah.
awful. Now, of course, before we go, well, Tice, thank you so much for speaking with me and giving me your time because honestly, despite all the random technical things, you stuck with me and I appreciate it. So huge,
It's
huge
been a
thanks.
lovely it's been lovely to talk to you, Shashati. And it's yeah, we had a lovely time. Thanks.
Thanks so much.